Hey everybody, this is GGB. We're going to get into our first week of actual college football. Week 1, let's get it. I understand I did week 0 last week, but let's be honest, the only really good game that weekend was always going to be Nebraska-Northwestern. And while that did turn out to be an absolute banger of a game, unfortunately, we didn't get all the great teams. No top 25 teams playing. Today, we actually have some top 25 teams playing. So that's really exciting for everyone. I believe only 2, as long as I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 2 top 25 teams we got today. But regardless, shoot. I keep trying to get my hair down. It's stuck in this position. I'm sorry, guys. You have to see this insane hairstyle. But, my hair just does what it wants sometimes. At 6 o'clock, we got St. Francis from Pennsylvania, which went 5-6 last year in the FCS. Traveling to Akron, which went 2-10 last year, on ESPN3. Quarterback for Akron is DJ Irons. He went 78-120 last year, threw for 892 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, for a 65% completion percentage. Jonzel Nordels, he had 118 carries for 573 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Tristan Brank had 25 catches for 269 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, I understand this is probably on no one's radar for today, outside of Akron fans, who probably are going to be the only ones watching this game, considering that an hour later we're going to be watching some actually really solid football with Oklahoma State and Pitt both playing, and Tennessee playing, and UCF. And Wake Forest, so there's 3 ranked teams playing today. So, really an hour later, we're going to get some really high-quality football games. So, I don't see a lot of people watching this unless you're an Akron fan. But one of the main reasons I'm going to be following the game is simply because Joe Moorhead is now the head coach of Akron. And as much as I love Joe Moorhead, obviously his head coaching experience didn't go great in the past. He ended up if you guys don't know who Joe Moorhead was, he was the offensive coordinator of Penn State for a couple of years, I think. When Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley were there, they were killing it, right? So he ends up getting the head coaching job at Mississippi State. A couple years, I think it was 2 or maybe 3 seasons, they fire Joe Moorhead. They get Leach to come down here. And then he goes to Oregon to be the offensive coordinator there, and now he gets a job as a head coach again in Akron. So I'm going to be really exciting. Did the offensive coordinator job at Oregon help improve it? Because he was really great last year at OC. He was a really great offensive coordinator last year for Oregon. Is that somehow going to help him be a better head coach? Or maybe he thrives in a smaller conference like the MAC. Obviously, Akron's not expecting to compete for a conference title right away. I don't even think they're expecting to compete for a bowl game right away. But even 3 or 4 wins and being competitive in some games would be a huge upgrade over what they did last year. They're favored by a lot in this game, and honestly, it's probably too much. I think it's around 40 points. So I'm going to go with St. Francis, PA to cover, but Akron to win this one outright. At 7 o'clock, we get our first ranked game. Let's get it, guys. I'm so hyped. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. 7 o'clock, we got Central Michigan, which went 9-4 last year, traveling to number 12, Oklahoma State, which went 12-2 last year. Oklahoma State favored 21 points on FS1. And I like to talk about Central Michigan. It was a good team last year. People forget about the Chippewas because Northern Illinois came in and it was the Cinderella story last year in the MAC. I'm going to say it. It was a team that no one thought was going to be very good. That was really horrible the year before. They come in, they don't start out great, but they end up winning the MAC, and it was just a great story for the Huskies. People forget about how the Chippewas were really good last year. They beat Washington State, a Power 5 team. Now, I understand Washington State not on the same level as Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State obviously was a team that was a yard away from a playoff spot last year. So this is a much different team that they're facing. But I think this is a possibility of being a really great football game. The Chippewas are not a bad football team by any stretch of the imagination. Daniel Richardson, their quarterback, went 191-316 last year, threw for 2,633 yards, and had a 24 touchdown to 6 interception ratio. Lewis Nichols, the running back, had 341 carries for 1,848 yards and 16 touchdowns. And Dallas Dixon had 45 catches for 701 yards and 8 touchdowns. Oklahoma State, on the other hand, returns their starting quarterback, obviously. Spencer Sanders had 243, 391 last year, threw for 2,839 yards, 20 touchdowns, a 12 interception ratio, and a 62.1% completion percentage. Dominic Richardson had 79 carries for 373 yards last year and 5 touchdowns, and Brendan Presley had 50 catches for 619 yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, have these teams ever played before? Weirdly enough, they've played twice, and they actually split this. They each won one of these games. The last game was in 2016, and weirdly enough, Central Michigan, the Chippewas, won that game. So this determines who's going to be leading the series. It's not a big deal of all things, but it's at least somewhat interesting to look at. I think Oklahoma State's a really good team, but I think people forgot how they started out last year. They started out very slow. They were lucky to win their games last year at the beginning of the year. They barely eked past Tulsa. Tulsa was a team that was not very good. They barely eked by Boise State. So early on, they were staying undefeated by the skin of their teeth. They were not. It was like Notre Dame at the beginning of the year. Everyone remembers Notre Dame at the end of the year. It was a really great football team. A lot of people forget that Notre Dame at the beginning of the year almost lost to Toledo and Florida State, which were both not great football teams last year. So let's get that straight. I think this has the possibility of being a really phenomenal game. I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win it, but I think the Chippewas keep it closer than that 21-point spread indicates. At 7 o'clock, we got West Virginia, which went 6-7 last year, traveling to number 17 Pitt, which went 11-3 last year. Pitt favored by 7 points on ESPN. I know what you're thinking. It shouldn't be that close of a game, but these are two very different teams than they were last year, mainly because of the transfers. And people graduating, obviously, and heading for the NFL. West Virginia's biggest addition in, I want to say free agency, but transfer portal, JT Daniels. He was a quarterback that was supposed to go number 1 overall. If you go back a year from now, people are talking about JT Daniels as one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. He was projected number 1 pick by a lot of people, me included. I thought he was really, really great. He gets hurt in the first game against Clemson. And then just the fact that Stetson Bennett was winning football games, they don't want to upset that rhythm, so they just keep JT Daniels on the bench. But he's a really great quarterback, guys. This West Virginia Mountaineers have a good chance of winning this one simply because of their quarterback. I mean, JT Daniels is a phenomenal player. Tony Mathis Jr. had 72 carries for 312 yards last year. Bryce Ford Wheaton had 42 catches for 575 yards and 3 touchdowns. Pitt, on the other hand, it's another story about transfers and people graduating. Obviously, the heart and soul of the Pitt team last year that went 11-2 and won the ACC championship game was obviously Kenny Pickett. It was no question Kenny Pickett was the heart and soul of that football team. And he was the person who almost led them to a playoff spot, maybe. It was close. If he doesn't lose a weird game against Western Michigan, which in hindsight is a really weird loss that probably should not have happened. But if he doesn't lose that game, Kenny Pickett likely could possibly lead the Pitt Panthers to a playoff spot, which would have been insane to think about, but a playoffs that could have included the Oklahoma State Cowboys, the Pitt Panthers, and the Cincinnati Bearcats was a possibility. And it was a crazy one, but it was a possibility here. And it would have been weird, but it was a possibility. The transfer that I'm talking about now, though, is they bring in Caden Slovis. Caden Slovis was another quarterback that had a possibility of going first round last year. He didn't end up going first round. He ends up getting benched at USC. But USC has a tough year last year. He transfers to Pitt, which suddenly sees the amount of success go up. And it's actually a really interesting combination. Caden Slovis went 193-297 last year, threw for 2,153 yards, 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions for a 65% completion percentage. Remember, Caden Slovis did not start the entire year, so 2,153 yards not starting for a large portion of the year, or at least a significant portion of the year, is an impressive feat all by itself. Obviously, the interceptions have to go down and the touchdowns have to go up, but this is an impressive addition. They also returned their running back, Israel Abanikanda, It's a hard last name. 123 carries for 651 yards last year and 7 touchdowns. Now, the important thing to note here is also the receiving core. I was going to mention Jordan Addison, but he actually transferred to USC. Jordan Addison was a guy that was one of the best receivers in the entire college football last year. They lose him, which is why I'm saying transfer portal is a huge aspect of this game. Jared Wayne is their new leading receiver. Had 47 catches for 658 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. These teams have actually played a lot. We're talking about like 101 total games between the two teams. Pitt has kind of dominated the series. They're winning 61-40 so far, but the last 3 have gone to West Virginia. Last time these two teams played was in 2016. So we're getting a rivalry game that has been dead for at least 6 years here, and we're getting it back. So that's actually really cool. I think this has the possibility of being the best game of the day. I'm going to say it. West Virginia was a team that was not very good last year. I'll say that. They were a team that was very disappointing. But West Virginia did get a big quarterback in JT Daniels, and he single-handedly could lead a team to victory here. Now, I'm going to go Pitt, and I'll tell you why. Just like the reason why I should have picked Northwestern last week and I picked Nebraska instead. The fact is, new quarterbacks have an adjustment period. I understand both these quarterbacks are new. They're both new to the system, which makes this actually a really interesting matchup. But this Pitt team is a much stronger overall team than the West Virginia team. And the fact is, as well as Casey Thompson played last week for Nebraska, I'm learning my lesson. He still had major mistakes that he made. And the fact is because he was not used to the offense that was around him. This was like a brand new offense to him. And he made a significant mistake down the stretch that really cost them the game. So I understand both brand new quarterbacks, but I feel like there's continuity on both sides, obviously. But I feel like there's a lot more continuity on Pitt's side that's like good continuity, obviously. Like, we don't want bad continuity. We don't want a continuity that resulted in a 6-7 season last year. We want good continuity. That's why I'm going to go with Pitt. But I think it's a close game. I'm going to go with it. West Virginia covers here, although I'm not exactly super confident in that one. 7 o'clock, we got Ball State, which went 6-7 last year, traveling to Tennessee, which went 7-6 last year. Tennessee are at 32.5 points on the SEC network. Obviously, 7-6 doesn't sound great. I'm going to get into why it is really good and huge improvement for Tennessee in a little bit. We're going to talk about Ball State for a hot second, though. Ball State, John Paddock, their quarterback, went 18-26 last year, only threw for 132 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and had a 69.2% completion percentage. Now, this is a new quarterback for Ball State. I mean, obviously he played a little bit, but not enough to really consider him super confident in that system, at least have super confidence in him to like try and pull off a huge upset here. Carson Steele, their running back, had 192 carries for 891 yards last year and had 6 touchdowns rushing. And Ja'Shawn Jackson had 69 catches for 826 yards and 5 touchdowns. But let's talk about Tennessee for a little bit. Josh Heupel. I keep messing that up. Jeremy Pruitt is no longer the head coach of Tennessee. You get it through your head. But Josh Heupel actually had this team improving. And it is actually really exciting to see. As a Florida fan, I don't want Tennessee to succeed. But as a football fan, I think it's really cool the turnaround we've seen from a program like Tennessee. Tennessee was bad. I don't know how else to phrase it. It was not a good football team. You go back a couple years. But it's exciting now. And it's because, number one, Heupel's great coaching. But number two, the quarterback. And I feel like I have to mention it. Hendon Hooker has gone 206, 312 last year. Threw for 2,945 yards, 31 touchdowns with 3 interceptions, and a 68.2% completion percentage. And I was loving on Hendon Hooker before he even went to Tennessee. Honestly. I watched him at Virginia Tech. He was a great quarterback. And Virginia Tech, I don't know how you let him go. I honestly don't. Braxton Burmeister was not good enough, in my opinion, to consider benching Hendon Hooker. It made no sense to me. And obviously Hendon Hooker goes to Tennessee. And he's thriving there. He didn't start the year, weirdly enough. He was not the starter for Tennessee when the season began. but he should have been. And honestly, he proved himself. And if we're talking about quarterbacks in the SEC that are really good, obviously you're going to talk about Bryce Young first. But Will Levis and Hendon Hooker, in my opinion, are very similar skill levels, and I think they're both great QBs. Both have a chance of making it in the future into the NFL. So I think it's a possibility of being a really, really one-sided game. Obviously, Tennessee could blow it because it's Tennessee. I forgot to mention the rest of their talent. Running back, you're going to have Jabari Small starting. He had 140 carries for 792 yards last year and 9 touchdowns. And Cedric Tillman's going to be the leading receiver with 64 catches for 1,081 yards and 12 touchdowns. These two teams have never played before, which is pretty interesting. But in my opinion, this should be a Tennessee blowout. I don't like the Volunteers. I hope they fail next year. But I'm torn because I love Heupel and I love Hendon Hooker. I both think they're phenomenal player/coach combination. But yeah, this should be an easy blowout Tennessee win. And Tennessee could give Georgia a little bit of fight this year, in my opinion. Tennessee's a good football team. I'm kind of excited to see what they do. 7 o'clock, we got South Carolina State, which went 7-5 last year. Traveling to UCF, went 9-4 last year on ESPN+. And UCF's going to have to... It's completely new. It's a weird thing to say, but... This is a completely new football team this year, and it's because of their quarterbacks. You really have no consistency at QB. Obviously, you had Dylan Gabriel last year at the beginning, and you're like, okay, we're gonna kill it. Dylan Gabriel is one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Really, he's a really phenomenal QB. And then he got hurt, and now he's gone. He went to Oklahoma, which really sucks if you're a UCF fan. And the quarterback that ended up starting and leading you to this 9-4 season is replaced by John Plumlee. John Plumlee is an interesting story. He only went 101 for 6 yards last year. But this was a highly touted prospect who went to Ole Miss. You get him from the transfer portal. He has the ability to be a really good QB. I don't know if he will yet. But UCF's a good enough football team that considerably you could compete if you're UCF for an American title. I understand it's going to be a tough thing to convince a lot of people of, considering you're still in the same division, same side as Cincinnati. And even if you make it past them, Houston is likely awaiting you in the AAC championship, unless SMU makes a surprise thing. But both those are really good football teams. But UCF has a chance to make a run here at the AAC. It has a good football team. Isaiah Bowser, their running back, had 189 carries last year for 703 yards and 9 touchdowns. And Ryan O'Keefe had 84 catches for 812 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. So, UCF Knights, they look good. As a Florida fan, I actually really like UCF. Okay, I know a lot of Florida fans don't like them because they beat us last year in the conference championship, in their bowl game. But I don't really hold a grudge for that. Florida played poorly. I don't know how else to say it. UCF definitely deserved that victory. And the fact is, UCF, I know a lot of people who go to UCF. I'm really pulling for them this year. And the Bounce House is just an insane environment for a Group of 5 team to have. The Bounce House is easily, in my opinion, one of the biggest home field advantage in all of Group of 5. Really have an insane fan base down there in Orlando. I think UCF wins this game and wins it by a lot. I picked them to cover the spread too. 7 o'clock, we got Bryant, which went 7-4 last year, traveling to FIU, which went 1-11 on ESPN3. Gunnar Holmberg is their new quarterback. He had 217. He went 217 and 324 last year. Threw for 2,358 yards. Had 7 touchdowns to 8 interceptions and a 67% completion percentage. That name sounds familiar. Gunnar Holmberg. He was the former quarterback at Duke last year, pretty sure. So, brand new team here, Clemson, Florida International. Florida International, as much as I love them as a Florida team, they're bad. They've been really bad since Morgan left. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about them. Bryant has a legitimate chance here of upsetting them. They do. Florida International's favored, but not by a lot. It's still a one-score game, which is pathetic if you're Florida International. You should probably be favored by a lot more than that against Bryant. But, you know, it's Bryant. It's a powerhouse. Lexington Joseph is their leading running back this year. He had 57 carries for 273 yards last year and a touchdown. And Tyrese Chambers had 45 catches for 1,074 yards and 9 touchdowns in the receiving aspect of the game. This one's a tough one, honestly. I don't have a lot of faith in the Panthers. I don't think they're a good football team. Gunnar Holmberg obviously started at the Power 5 level. Obviously not with a good school in Duke. But, you know, he's solid enough to conceivably. But Florida International is a bad team all around. I'm going to go upset here. I think the Bryant Bulldogs have a legitimate chance of pulling off this upset and taking down the Panthers. 7 o'clock, we got Long Island University, which went 2-8 last year. Traveling to Toledo, which went 7-6 last year on ESPN3. DeQuan Finn is the quarterback for Toledo, the Rockets. He went 144, 250 last year, threw for 2,067 yards, had 18 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and had a 57.6% completion percentage. Micah Kelly had 59 carries for 314 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Devin Maddox had 41 catches for 567 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, Toledo is not the greatest team in the MAC. I'll say that right off the bat. It's good. It's a good team. It's always at least somewhere in the It's always this. Last year was a bad year for it. I'll say that for Toledo. They're normally competing for something important, or at least in the conversation for the MAC championship every year. But obviously coming off a not great year, 7-6 isn't the best record. It's not the record that Toledo's shooting for. But yeah, I think Toledo should win this game. I think it should win by a lot. I mean, I think they have a bounce back year this year. I think Toledo has at least 8-9 wins this season. I think they're a better football team than a lot of teams in the MAC, in my opinion. And Long Island University is just not that good. It's not really good at all. But I think Toledo wins this one, and I think they win it by a lot, and they cover the spread. At 7:30, we got VMI, Virginia Military Institute, went 6-5 last year, traveling to number 22 Wake Forest, which went 11-3 at the ACC network. And this is going to be Wake Forest, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating teams to watch. Because last year it was insane, but I was talking Wake Forest into November-ish, late October, early November-ish, which is crazy to be talking about Wake Forest for that long. But that's how long I was talking about Wake Forest, because they were consistently in the playoff picture. They weren't obviously back dab in the middle of it, but they were there. They were, conceivably speaking, in the running to make the playoffs for a long time, which was really kind of crazy to me. But you know, it turned out this Wake Forest team was really good. Sam Hartman's a really good QB. Which made me really excited to see Wake Forest this year, because Clemson should be at better strength, and NC State also looks really good this year. So I thought we could finally have some serious competition on that side of the ACC. And then I get the news that Sam Hartman might be out for the entire season. Now, still possibly comes back, and hopefully early enough for that NC State Clemson games, which are going to prove to be crucial. But this Michael Kern guy, he's going to have to carry for a significant part of the season. And so I'm going to be really interested to see how he does in this first game. Michael Kern went 2-5 last year. Obviously did not see much playing time. At 67 yards, 40% completion percentage. No touchdowns, no interceptions. Justice Ellison, the running back, had 107 carries for 541 yards last year and 7 touchdowns. But their running game wasn't the issue. It wasn't really their threat. It was their passing game, which is why A.T. Perry, their leading receiver, returning, had 71 catches for 1,293 yards and 15 touchdowns. Wake Forest has a good receiving core. I'm really interested to see how this Michael Kern guy does. I doubt he has the job once Sam Hartman comes back, simply because we know how really great Sam Hartman has the ability of being. Really some amazing throws that guy can make. And the reason they won a lot of last year was because of shootouts, and it was in large part because of Sam Hartman. So I'm really kind of interested to see who comes out on top in this matchup. But I think it's probably going to be Wake Forest by a lot. I don't know why I was really excited. It's probably going to be a blowout, Wake Forest. I'm excited to see Michael Kern and how he does, though. I pick Wake Forest to win and cover here. At 8 o'clock, we got the game I'm most excited about. Let's go. Penn State, which went 7-6 last year, traveling at Purdue, which went 9-4 last year. Penn State favored by 3 points on Fox. And I understand what you're thinking. Penn State went 7-6 last year. Why are you excited about this game? Like, it should be pretty bad. Penn State's obviously was bad last year. They went 7-6, and Purdue's obviously good because they went 9-4. Don't let the stats fool you how badly Penn State's season last year went. It went downhill rather quickly. But don't forget, this is a team that started 4 or 5 or 5-0. Like, this is a team that was deep into the top 5 at the beginning of the year. And the season was really thrown. The wrench was really thrown into the season. The Iowa game. The Iowa game, in my opinion, was the turning point for Penn State because they were undefeated heading into the matchup. So was Iowa. And it was in Iowa City. But unfortunately, Penn State had a significant lead at halftime. But they lose Sean Clifford in the first half, their starting quarterback. And Sean Clifford is, in my opinion, the reason why they lost that football game. You bring in Taquan Roberson, and he gets really nothing going on offense. He throws a lot of interceptions. And it's just Taquan Roberson obviously was not the guy. And they ended up losing that game in large part because Taquan Roberson saw the field. Then you look at the season goes on. Having a bad backup in Taquan Roberson forces Sean Clifford to have to start through a bad injury against Illinois, which they lose. And then they lose the Ohio State game. And by that point, their confidence is just shot. They lose a heartbreaker to Michigan and then a heartbreaker to Michigan State. And then they lose their bowl game. I don't put a lot on losing the bowl game. A lot of players opted out on that defensive side of the ball. And it was a lot of new people. Don't believe Jahan Dotson played in that game either. And it was a weird season. It was a weird season for Penn State, a season that started out so promising and was really destroyed by injuries. But this is a brand new season for Penn State. They have an actual favorable schedule, in my opinion. It's definitely the better schedule I've seen so far. You draw Purdue, Northwestern, and Minnesota from the other side, which you could have drawn a lot worse. Iowa, no Wisconsin. So that's great. Minnesota and Purdue obviously are real ones to worry about that. Sean Clifford last year went 261 for 428, threw for 3,107 yards, had 21 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, and had a 61% completion percentage. Their running game was bad last year. There's no other way to put it. Kayvon Lee's their leading returning rusher, but they have 2 freshmen that they're excited about. He had 108 carries for 530 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Parker Washington's their leading returning receiver, which, considering that you had a first-round pick in Jahan Dotson, I did not expect this, but Parker Washington actually last year had 64 catches for 820 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not to mention they bring in the Western Kentucky receiver transfer, who also had a lot of yards with Bailey Zappi as their quarterback. I think this is possibly being a really good game, too, because Purdue's a good team as well. Aiden O'Connell last year went 315, a 440 threw for 3,712 yards, 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, and had a 71.6% completion percentage. Don't forget, Purdue is also the team that's known for upsets. They upset 2 good teams last year in Iowa and Michigan State. 2 teams that heading into the Purdue game thought that was going to be a walk in the park. So that was just really kind of interesting on Purdue's part. Unfortunately, they didn't get the upset over Ohio State. That would have been really awesome to complete the trifecta, but they did not do that. King Doru, their running back, had 135 carries for 533 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And Payne Durham, their leading returning receiver, had 45 catches for 467 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how these teams have done against each other in the past. Penn State has won 15 of the last 18 matchups. They've won 9 straight. The last matchup was in 2019. Purdue's last victory was in 2004, so I was 1 year old when last time Purdue actually won this matchup. So that's kind of depressing if you're Purdue. But I think this is possibly being a really great game. I'm so excited to watch it as a Penn State fan. I really think that Penn State probably wins this one. Still only a 3-point game. I think Penn State wins it by more than 3, though. Hey, everybody, this is GGB. We're getting into the 8 o'clock game. Eastern Illinois went 1-10 last year. Traveling Northern Illinois, which went 9-5 last year on ESPN+. This game's really kind of interesting, at least in my opinion, simply because we haven't seen Northern Illinois since they lost that bowl game to Coastal Carolina. And actually, like, Northern Illinois was one of the biggest surprises last year, for me, at least. Oklahoma State can rival them because Oklahoma State went from being a team that was considered to be maybe 6-7 wins to almost making the playoffs. So Oklahoma State and Baylor were around the same level of surprise. Good team, like surprisingly really good football team. Northern Illinois was, in my opinion, the biggest surprise of Group of 5. Everyone knew Cincinnati was going to be good. UTEP has the argument to be made. They were one of the bigger surprises last year, same with UTSA. But in my opinion, it's Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois went from being really, really bad in the 2020 season. Like, they were really kind of atrocious. Come back in the 2021 season after COVID, and they absolutely kill it. They started off the season not hot, and then they end up bouncing back. They end up winning a whole bunch of games, and they end up going to the MAC championship and winning it. And this is why Northern Illinois, in my opinion, was one of the better stories last year. They obviously beat Georgia Tech last year. So, like, there was a lot of good things to watch if you were a Northern Illinois fan. Real thing is, can they build on it? Rocky Lombardi's coming back as their starting quarterback. He went 343 last year, threw for 2,597 yards, 15 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Harrison Wally had 101 carries for 574 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Trayvon Rudolph had 51 catches for 892 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, this game shouldn't be close at all. It's not like this is a good FCS team. Eastern Illinois was bad. They were really bad last year. Northern Illinois is a team that I don't know if I expect the same level. Like, I feel like it's a little bit much to expect the same level of what you guys were able to accomplish last year again. I feel like that's a little bit pushing it. But, you know, I feel like they could win 7-8 games, I think, this year. I think that's a reasonable possibility for Northern Illinois, and I think they're significantly better than Eastern Illinois. So give me Northern Illinois to win and cover this one. At 8 o'clock, we got Alabama A&M, which went 7-3 last year. Carolina UAB, which went 9-4 last year on the CBS Sports Network. Dylan Hopkins went 155 to 235 last year, threw for 2,274 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, for a 66% completion percentage. Dwayne McBride, their leading rusher, actually had 204 carries for 1,371 yards last year and 13 touchdowns. So bringing insane talent back on that side of the ball. And then their leading receiver, Tria Shropshire, had 27 catches for 703 yards and 7 touchdowns. The fact that UAB should be, as they always are, a team to be reckoned with in Conference USA. It's always a toss-up to what the other team's going to be, but UAB has been a constant for as long as they restarted their football program. Of really, really great football team. They're constantly good. They're constantly at least in championship contender mode. Last year, UTSA was the team that was really pushing them for it. UAB is the team to beat, though, in my opinion, in the Conference USA, and it's been that way for a while. I really, really appreciate what the Blazers have done with their program. Alabama A&M is a good FCS program. Don't get me wrong. I really respect what they've been able to do there. The fact is, UAB is a really good program in their FBS program. So they should be better. They should be significantly better. So I'm going to go with UAB to win and cover in this one. At 8 o'clock, we had Louisiana Tech, which went 3-9 last year, traveling to Missouri, which went 6-7 last year. Missouri favored by 19 points on ESPNU. Matthew Downing, the quarterback for Louisiana Tech, is a new quarterback. He threw 4 passes last year, completed 3 of them, threw for 26 yards. So Louisiana Tech's hoping that this Downing guy is pretty good. Greg Garner, their leading returning rusher from last year, had 54 carries for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Smoke Harris, their leading receiver, had 71 catches for 756 yards and 6 touchdowns. Missouri, on the other hand, brings back Brady Cook, their quarterback. He went 46 of 58 last year, 3,450 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and had a 79.3% completion percentage. Cody Schrader, their rusher this year, He has never carried the ball. He's a brand new running back, so we'll see how he does at Missouri. And Chance Looper, he's their leading receiver, coming from 21 catches for 203 yards and a touchdown. So yeah, Missouri, it's an interesting football team. I expect them to be around the same level. I like Eli Drinkwitz as a coach. I don't really have complete faith that he can turn this Missouri program into anything other than the best they can do is really 8 wins, conceivably speaking. I don't see them being able to do much more than that ever, really. This is a Missouri program. I mean, you should just be fine with being mediocre. This is the Purdue of the SEC. Really a team that's okay, and they can pull off an upset every now and then, but never go expecting heading into the season any chance at the playoffs, any reasonable chance at the playoffs, especially because you're on the same side as Georgia and Florida. It's going to be really tough for you guys to even conceivably try and make it there, but you can at least try. These two teams have never fought before, and I think it's actually going to be really interesting. Missouri's favored by 19 in this one, but remember, Louisiana Tech barely lost to Mississippi State week 1 last year. So that's a little bit concern because they were not good last year. They went 3-9, and they still almost beat Mississippi State, which in my opinion, Mississippi State's a better football team than Missouri. I think Missouri should win this one, but I think it could possibly be closer than the 19-point spread indicates. I'm going to bet on the fact that Downing is actually a good QB, and I think he has the possibility of being one with Louisiana Tech. So yeah, give me Louisiana Tech, the Bulldogs, to cover against the Tigers. At 9 o'clock, we had New Mexico State, which went 2-10 last year, traveling to Minnesota, which went 9-4. Minnesota favored by 37 points on the Big Ten Network. Diego Pavia is their new starting QB. New Mexico State played... They played... I'm trying to remember. Nevada. They played Nevada last week. Pretty positive. Double check. Yes. Yep, they played Nevada. This was at New Mexico State, and they lost by a good amount. They did score the first safety of the college football season, so that's at least a bright side if you're the Aggies. But the fact is, you actually did pretty well against Nevada early on, conceivably speaking. You took an early lead, guys. You did a solid enough job. The fact is, New Mexico State is nowhere near as good as Minnesota, which is why Minnesota's favored by 37 points. Tanner Morgan is coming back as a quarterback for Minnesota for his about 70th year in the program. He went 149 to 249 last year, threw for 2,044 yards, 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Mohamed Ibrahim is back, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about probably the best back in all college football, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen. Mohamed Ibrahim is an absolute beast. He was unfortunately hurt in the very first game of the season against Ohio State last year, which is in large part why they weren't able to pull off the upset. They were very close to beating Ohio State in the opener, but unable to pull it out in large part because this guy got hurt. Mohamed Ibrahim is such a huge part of that offense. He had 30 carries for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. Chris Outman-Bell is their leading returning receiver. He had 36 catches last year for 506 yards and 6 touchdowns. Minnesota leads this series 2-1 all time. The last two have obviously gone to Minnesota in 2013 and 2018, but New Mexico State was able to beat them in 2011. I think this one's a pretty obvious pick. It's Minnesota all the way. I expect them to win and cover this one. Minnesota's a team I think legitimately can vie for a Big Ten West title this year. Wisconsin, in my opinion, is not the strongest team in the world. I really don't believe it is. Their Graham Mertz is never going to convince me that he can win any games, really. Iowa's an interesting story, too, because they started off the season so hot last year, but then they kind of fell off down by the end of the year. They just weren't good by the end of it. And it was weird, but their offense seemed to have been figured out by the Big Ten defenses, so I don't know what to exactly take away from that. Iowa, but Minnesota, in my opinion, has the most potent offense when they're healthy of the Big Ten West. Maybe Nebraska or Northwestern can have the argument. It's made too. And Purdue has a pretty potent offense when they're healthy as well. But I think it's Minnesota all the way. The other teams have huge question marks. I don't really have any huge question marks for Minnesota. I think the Golden Gophers could be really good last year. They were down, in my opinion, last year, and they were down their best player, Muhammad Ibrahim. They still went 9-4. So I would say this is a really good football team that has a chance at making a run at the Big Ten West title, very realistically. At 10 o'clock, we went Northern Arizona, which went 5-6 last year, traveling to Arizona State, which went 8-5 on the Pac-12 network. Emory Jones, the transfer out of Florida. Now, he went 224 346 last year, threw for 2,734 yards and 19 touchdowns to 13 interceptions and a 64.7% completion percentage. But that's not what's impressive about Emory Jones. His arm is definitely the lesser of the two. Is his legs. His legs are amazing. He is a really good running QB, and I think that could work really well in the Arizona State offense that was set up for Jaden Daniels last year. There shouldn't be too much of a change in how the offense is functioning this year. I think the Sun Devils and Herm Edwards, it's a weird combination they got going there. I don't know what's going on with the Sun Devils because they're constantly accused of things, but Herm Edwards, in my opinion, is a really good head coach. I don't know what exactly he's doing over there, but I think this could be his last year if he has a bad year. So I think he has an extra incentive. Xavier Valade had 209 carries for 1,070 yards last year and 6 touchdowns, and Cam Johnson had 34 catches for 327 yards and 4 touchdowns. I might be wrong, but I believe Northern Arizona was the team that beat actually Arizona last year. Arizona was almost able to pull off that upset, was unfortunately unable to do it. Arizona, poor Wildcats. They really can't beat anyone. But Northern Arizona, it's a meh FCS team in my opinion. It's not great, and I don't think it's even close to Arizona State's talent level. I think the Sun Devils run away with this one rather easily. Give me the Sun Devils to win and cover on this one. At 10:30, we got Cal Poly, which went 2-9 last year, traveling to Fresno State, which went 10-3 on FS1. And I think what's really kind of interesting about this game is how good can Fresno State be? Because they bring back Jake Haener, the quarterback who upset UCLA, I believe, almost upset Oregon last year. This is a quarterback that was phenomenal for the Bulldogs last year. He went 329 to 490, threw for 4,096 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. 67.1% completion percentage. They bring back Jordan Mims on the ground, had 127 carries for 710 yards last year and 6 touchdowns. And Jalen Cropper had 85 catches for 899 yards and 11 touchdowns. This should be a blowout early. Don't get me wrong. Cal Poly really stands no chance here against the Bulldogs. I think what's interesting to watch about this game is how good can Fresno State really be? Because you're talking about a Mountain West that's kind of wide open right now. I mean, San Diego State won it last year, but that was a large part on the defense and obviously the punter who shall not be named, but he was really good last year. He was called the punt god for a reason. He flipped the field a lot of the time, and San Diego State's wins were a lot on their defense and their special teams. Not a lot on their offense, in my opinion. Fresno State has a legitimate... Boise State is not looking the strongest as it's... Obviously, it's Boise State, so they're obviously still a threat. But they don't look like the best team in the Mountain West right now. And in my opinion, if I had to bet on the team that's going to win the Mountain West, it would be Fresno State right now. So I think they have a legitimate chance here to be really good. And this is their tune-up game. So take into account, make sure none of your starting players get hurt. But this game's interesting to watch just simply for watching how good Fresno State could be this year. At 10:30, we got the last game of the day. Portland State, which went 5-6, traveling to San Jose State, which went 5-7 last year. Shavon Cordero went at 195 at 353, threw for 2,793 yards, 17 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Kyrie Robinson had 64 carries for 280 yards and a touchdown last year. And Isaiah Hamilton had 31 catches for 414 yards and 2 touchdowns. San Jose State, not the best Mountain West team, I'm not going to lie. I think it would be a win this year if they simply got to 500 and got to a bowl game. That'd be a win, in my opinion, if I am a San Jose Spartan fan. I think what's interesting about this game is Portland State's not great. They're not a great football team, FCS-wise or not. But San Jose State's not either. I don't think either of these teams are all that great. But I do think San Jose State's a Mountain West team, and I normally put more value on that than I do just Portland State being a mediocre FCS team. I feel like if this was another way, if it was a really good FCS team, I'd probably pick that. I think San Jose State wins this one, but not by a lot.